You are listening to The Pilgrim on the 405 with Will Christ. Join him as he and his guests discover how businesses thrive in California.
Welcome to The Pilgrim on the 405. This morning we're going to be speaking with Joe Flynn, CEO of Vereco, and the champ of the trestles, surfer. I think Joe had to take a towel with him this morning to dry off to get here to the interview, right?
I did, but I did go home and take a shower and take one at the beach. I was thinking about it.
Hey, so Joe, tell us a little bit about Vereco.
Yeah, well, Verico does document services for hospitals, and why that's important is because people don't know this, but in the age of electronic medical records, hospitals still produce huge volumes of paper coming out of hundreds, maybe in some cases, depending on the size of the hospital, thousands of different devices. So, for example, the average 250-bed hospital is probably doing 1 million to 2 million pieces of paper every month. There's a very expensive and cumbersome process. They've got multiple vendors that they're working with. So what Verico does is we essentially go in and manage that entire process on behalf of the hospital, and we become a department inside of the hospital that manages the costs and manages the volume. And why that's important is because over the course of the last 10 years, hospitals have spent hundreds of millions of dollars implementing electronic medical records with the idea that paper was going to reduce dramatically. Well, the reality has been quite different. Paper is still very pervasive in hospitals, and it's actually become kind of part of the infrastructure of how hospitals work. It's a workflow issue, and so they've struggled tackling this. Typically, they turn to equipment manufacturers like a Xerox or a Canon or something like this, and while they have good equipment, they don't really have a good process. So Verico started this business in 2011, really going in and managing that process managing the process and the vendors on behalf of the hospital. Not unlike what you would see, to make it in simple terms, we walk into a hospital, you see a cafeteria. A lot of times hospitals outsource that cafeteria to a Aramark corporation or something like that. And Aramark manages all the vendors, all the food, all that. So kind of a similar process in that respect. And hospitals are used to the idea of outsourcing non-clinical functions. Prior to Verico, the reason I began with Verico in November of this year, but prior to that, I started a company called Auxilio that was very similar to Verico. In fact, the founders of Vereco and I started that company, and then they left and started Vereco. But I ran that company for the better part of about 12 years and took it from zero revenue to about $70 million, merged it with a cybersecurity consulting, healthcare cybersecurity consulting firm, put it up on the New York Stock Exchange, and just this past year, about a year ago, September or so, I left. After the merger, I decided to leave. On my own, very happily, and still very involved, as a shareholder in that company. And then now I'm with Vereco, and we've got, big plans to expand our footprint throughout the United States.
Well, thinking about electronic documentation and the paper, when I go into my Kaiser Permanente healthcare provider, they're on the computer.
Yeah.
Now I got to admit that when we started here 26 years ago, our primary care provider was not very comfortable with computers.
Sure.
And over 10 years he learned. Yeah. But now I walk in and that's it.
Kaiser is, it's interesting you say that. Kaiser is definitely advanced in the electronic medical record sort of continuum. However, I participated in their RFP 2 years ago, and the dirty little secret is they're producing throughout California 2 billion pieces of paper every month.
Every month?
Every month. Annually. Annually. Sorry, annually. And you're talking about probably tens of thousands of HP printers, Lexmark printers, and any other type of copier. So, yes, certain things have gone electronic. But what really has changed is, in the past, when you walked into a hospital, you filled out a bunch of forms. And in many hospitals, you still fill out a bunch of forms. Or you get there and they print out your forms for you. In the past, what they would do is they would buy those forms off-site at an off-site printing place. And then they'd have shelves full of different forms, tens of thousands of different forms that are required for whatever regulatory reason. That business actually has gone away with electronic medical records, the outside forms. But what has happened is because now the record is inside the hospital available. You don't have to pull it out of a filing cabinet. It's more readily accessible to print, and so the print has sort of shifted from outside printing to inside the hospital, and hospitals are struggling mightily with how do we reduce this? What do we need to do to stop having such a large infrastructure of equipment? And oftentimes what they have before a Verico comes in, they have an overabundance of equipment because they've been sold. Equipment manufacturers have really good sales teams and they have great sales training. So typically they oversell a hospital. Hospital has a lot more equipment than they actually need for the amount of print that they're doing. And so what we do is we come in and rationalize that and provide them with people, put them on site that really understand clinical environments and how print is really still part of the workflow of a clinical environment. And the reason it's not going to go away in any time soon, and why Kaiser still is producing 2 billion pieces of paper every month, is because other than banking, healthcare is the most regulated industry that exists, and electronic medical records are great. But to be honest with you, it's only about 20% of the actual print volume. Okay, you got to remember a hospital, Kaiser building. You're talking about a place that's got 2,000-3,000 employees, maybe more. People print stuff. It's just the way it is, and we've carved out a niche, being the alternative to just doing an RFP every 5 years and getting cheaper equipment. What ends up happening is they maybe get a cheaper price on a lease or something like that. But the reality is they end up buying way more than they need.
Well, how much of your process is to put things onto the web?
Well, it's really, our process is pretty basic. It's when and if they need certain types of documents to be included into the medical record, we'll help them with that. We'll help them integrate with that. But we're really dealing with vendor management primarily and service management.
But you're around paper.
Oh yeah, around the production of paper.
Right.
Hospitals. There's a process going on in a hospital that's a manufacturing process, and that manufacturing process is a printed document that has an entire supply chain behind that. You've got parts, you've got labor, you've got toner, you've got leases, you've got all these different elements that the hospital has to manage if they want to manage it on their own. That is time-consuming, cumbersome, expensive, all those kinds of things. We take that burden off the hospital's shoulders.
Well, where did this company come from? This sounds like a very clearly identified niche.
Yeah, well, when we started, I like to call it Vereco 1.0, which was Auxilio, which is now a company called CynergisTek. We were myself and my partner were hired by a group of investors that had looked at healthcare managed services as an interesting model because they liked recurring revenue contracts and they liked the fact that healthcare, for the most part, is recession-proof. And most of our contracts are long-term contracts, 3 to 5 years. And so that's an attractive thing for investors. And so we did some, a little bit of trial and error. We actually acquired a small company that had kind of a copier dealership that had a couple of big hospitals as customers around here in Southern California. And we took the model, as I mentioned earlier, we took the Aramark, but actually the ServiceMaster model. Back in the day, ServiceMaster was sort of a leading outsourced provider, and they were a Wall Street, they were a Wall Street superstar stock back in the 80s and 90s. Anyway, that model of outsourcing, of taking a process like food service or plant maintenance inside of a hospital, hospitals were looking to take that out of their day-to-day core activities. And we kind of modeled our service around what they were doing with food service or plant maintenance, where essentially we capture the entire process and capture the entire continuum of the supply chain and manage it to a cost, take advantage of supply chain as we got bigger, take advantage of being able to negotiate with the vendors better, that type of thing. So it's kind of a pure business process outsourcing sort of model. All
right. So what people who would make decisions about hiring you would be at what level?
Yeah, we typically work with CIOs. When we first started the business, we were working more with supply chain people in hospitals. But as two things really changed that: electronic medical records and the fact that all of these devices, these large multifunction devices, as they call them, are really networked devices, and printers are all networked as well. And most of those print devices also need to be compatible with whatever EMR system there are. And really, in the EMR wars that have taken place over the last few years, 2 or 3 have kind of dominated that space. One is Epic, it's a private company. Another is called Cerner, and another is Meditech. So the CIO, so it went from a purchasing manager or a purchasing decision, buying equipment, to a more of a solution-based sort of situation, because they had these big devices on the network and they were causing lots of problems. And in addition to that, they became vulnerable to cyber attacks. Mm-hmm. So it's a HIPAA issue now. It's very much a HIPAA issue. When you think about 1.5 million, 2 million documents being produced every month in a hospital, all those are wide open on live on a printer. People can take that stuff. So HIPAA is a big issue too. That's a concern, and why the CIOs end up being more of our customer.
All right. So what would a CFO be struggling with that he would find beneficial to call you?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different things. Number one, CFOs, especially the ones that I know in healthcare, struggle quite.
Now, is this CFO or CIO?
You asked CFO.
Well, excuse me.
Okay.
Well, I was thinking that if the CIO is your decision maker, so what would the CIO expect?
He or she would expect, number one, that we manage the vendor. That's a really important thing, managing the wide variety of vendors that they have to deal with.
So they'd be sick and tired of having multiple vendors.
Yes, they would be sick and sick and tired of it, and they might have different leases with different vendors. Especially the bigger the health system, okay, the more dysfunctional this is, because over the course of time, each individual hospital was sort of doing their own thing and writing leases here and there, and maybe having equipment that was not compatible. So the CIO would expect us to come in and identify where the issues are in terms of the vendor, the amount of vendors that they're dealing with, number one. Number two, and so they would want us to get that under control at a lower cost, okay? Mm-hmm. Number one. Because then they can go back to the CFO, as we mentioned earlier, and say, hey, not only can these guys provide, which is the second thing we offer, which is a superior level of service. Mm-hmm. We become a department, as an adjunct department to the IT organization. 20% of the help desk calls in a hospital are printer related.
So they'd be sick and tired of.
That's right.
Of two things, it seems to me. One, just the enormous numbers of calls.
That's it.
And having to compete for quality support people in a marketplace where they know nothing about it.
And more importantly, right now in a marketplace, but in a labor market for IT that is extremely tight.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so every year the CIOs have way more important stuff going on. Multiple applications being put on their network, and let's face it, their staffs are being pared down because hospitals are in financial crunch right now. Their Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements have come down, and so they're looking for all kinds of ways in which to save money. And so we take a burdensome process off their shoulders, okay, manage it to a higher level of service, a level of service that they're not used to, that they couldn't get from their own people, nor could they get from an equipment manufacturer, because they'd have to use maybe multiple different service people, okay, to do it. So in our case, we're sort of that one throat to choke. You know what I mean? Right. What our people do, we don't necessarily go and do the break fix service, but we manage all the vendors related to that. Mm-hmm. And so ultimately we're responsible for the service level agreements and the costs to managing this. It's really a process. It's no way other to describe it.
And you're more than a vendor.
We become, that's a great question, or a great point. We really, really become a partner, a department. It's very common with Verico that we've had this one young man in one of our hospitals in South Carolina that has been employee of the year for 2 years in a row for the hospital.
Right.
So we really become our teams on site, especially our manager, our client manager, really becomes part of the hospital team.
Well, and to become part of the leadership team for the CIO department.
Oftentimes we're part of the CIO's team. So when there's a weekly meeting, our person is there. We become part of their forms committees. We become part of their HIPAA regulation, sort of compliance committees. All of that is tied to the production of paper, and so.
And your people have expertise, plus they have a whole company behind them to supply additional expertise.
Absolutely, and we're operating right now in about 12 different states. Hopefully soon to double that. With the amount of plans that we have for growth.
Hope is not a strategy.
No, hope is not a strategy. No,
but you have a plan.
I never get ahead of myself.
But you do have a plan.
Oh, no, we have a very aggressive growth plan.
And you will be.
Go forward. And there's no question. It's one of the reasons why I joined Verico.
Right.
Me and the partners knew and know that, that there is a massive opportunity in this space right now in healthcare that really is underserved. Because the health systems are at the mercy of equipment vendors.
Well, yes. That's not something the equipment vendors have. I mean, that's just a legacy. And what you're doing is disrupting.
We're disrupting that legacy,
right?
That's a good point.
It's not like they've done something wrong.
No, in fact, what's important to understand is when we come in, we don't kick the vendors out.
No,
absolutely.
You rationalize the vendors.
We rationalize them. We make them work better, and oftentimes we become their partners as well. We have very excellent relationships with a lot of the equipment vendors.
Well, right, and you probably take a whole lot of the sales effort out of the vendors.
Well, if we are lucky enough to get a contract, then and the vendor is smart enough to work with us through that contract, then we've never lost. In the case of Verico, we've never lost a client. We've been in business since 2011. And if the vendor works with us, that vendor is going to be there as long as we're there.
Well, right. And if the vendor's not there, if the vendor doesn't want to work the way you work, he won't be there.
It's simple as that.
And it's not a matter of being a better presenter or having a cheaper product.
No.
It's a matter of how we're going to work together to accomplish the task, which is to be able to rationalize all the vendor relationships, how to provide a superior level of service, and to reduce the cost.
It's as simple as that.
And to me, those are the issues that a CIO who is, those are the things a CIO feeling those things should be calling you tomorrow.
I agree, and I think we've been Vereco in particular, not necessarily Auxilio. Auxilio is bigger than Vereco, but Vereco has been under the radar, and one of the reasons why the partners, and I decided to kind of join forces was, they've just built kind of a 2.0 model of the original model we built together 10, 12 years ago, and it takes it sort of to another level in terms of service, which the healthcare market really is dying for right now. They're kind of they've been doing the same things over and over again and getting the bad results, and so we really are the alternative.
Well, and that's the true value of a disruptive technology.
That's right.
I mean, that's what you're bringing is not necessarily technology.
As a service,
But
it's a mindset.
It's a mindset.
Yeah.
It's a process.
Yes.
But it is disruptive.
It is disruptive.
You will not be doing things the way you have been doing them, and you won't be getting the same results.
100%. And more importantly, it's data driven because we are very, very careful to provide on a regular basis data to our clients.
Most disruptive processes are data driven.
Yeah. It's critical.
Well, but now the original processes that are now legacy processes were data driven to some degree in terms of success and the return on investment, however they wanted to measure it. But because of the change in the dynamics in the marketplace, in the social sphere, all of these various pieces that are there, they're no longer getting them the results that they want. And so when you come in to say, we are going to give you results, and we can show you the data about it.
That's right.
It becomes very attractive.
Yeah, I would tell you, it's one of the reasons why we've been able to kind of penetrate the market as a small company fighting against gigantic corporations like Xerox and Ricoh and so forth, is because they are actually, in this particular area, not providing much data at all to the hospitals.
Well, right, because they're providing machines.
They're providing machines
That's the legacy.
and service, and that's right.
That's the legacy, and what you've done is you are in between the hospital and the machine vendor.
That's right.
And what that means is you have a stronger negotiating ability than the hospital.
Yes.
They don't know how to buy printers,
but
you do. That's your job.
That's true, and we buy tens of thousands
right,
of them.
and they don't know how to find the right kind of service mentality to keep it going, but you do.
Exactly. That's exactly that. It's interesting you got our model quickly. Sometimes it's a little difficult to explain the model, but quite honestly, it's quite simple.
Well, yes, it's disruptive.
It's disruptive.
And it starts with, what are the problems that you're experiencing?
What are the problems that you're experiencing, and why are they happening, and why do you want to put up with it anymore?
Well, but they don't need to know why it's happening.
Yeah.
You know why it's happening.
Right.
What you need to know is number one, are they happening? These dysfunctional pieces happening?
Yes.
And do these people, are they willing to do what's necessary to make the change? And then the cherry on the top is, and the investment is less in terms of time, money, and resources.
And I think what's good about Verico is that we have very, very happy clients. So it's not difficult for us to sell.
Of course.
The difficult part is to get access to a CIO of a major health system. That's the tough part. That's where you've got to do some legwork. But once we get there, and
of course,
and they talk to our client base, it's almost like, why would you do anything else?
Once you have access and you know what the pain is, then simply acknowledging that with them, then it's, how much more money am I going to have to pay? Well, what if it were less?
That's right. And I think that's where, the one thing that we're going to work on going forward is that access. That's how do we get access faster? How do we build a bigger brand? Maybe we make acquisitions. There's lots of different things we're thinking about in order to get the message out there.
All right, so I want to take a break here and come back, and I want you to tell us a little bit about what you have learned in your years in business in managing, hiring, what it means to move into a company. We're a startup, and you've been building, and the obstacles and the successes that you've had.
Okay.
All right.
Look forward to it.
So we'll take a short break and hear from our sponsors.
Hi, time for another tip from the Sandler Sales Institute. Prospects want your information and expertise. Prospects have been trained by the vast majority of salespeople to feel entitled to your valuable information. Most salespeople are comfortable in coughing up their expertise for free. However, when the orders don't come and the prospect has shopped your information to your competitor, the salesperson has fallen victim to unpaid consulting. Before giving information, ask good questions. What does the prospect want? What is the urgency? What are the consequences of not buying anything? What is the decision-making process? Eliminate unpaid consulting. This has been another Sandler Sales Institute tip.
Welcome back to the Pilgrim on the 405, where we're having a great conversation with Joe Flynn. In his spare time, he's CEO of Vereco, but his reality is surfing down at the trestles and celebrating with his two kids who are graduating from college. So, Joe, tell us, you've been in business for a while, and you've seen ups and downs. So talk to us about what are the things that you have learned. Give us some stories about obstacles, hurdles, things that get in the way that you have solved.
Yeah, I mean, obviously when you do a startup, the biggest obstacle is no one really knows who you are. You might have a good idea like the one we've been talking about, which is now a vibrant, very profitable company. But, getting access to the right decision makers is a challenge. Finding the right team, finding the right capital to get it off the ground. And those were always things that, were extremely challenging. But one of the ways we fixed that is to, again, especially in service business, you really have to have the right people around you. And not only right people working with you on your team, but also the right people guiding you and providing you access to the market that you want to go into. In our case, this is a very specific business-to-business, sort of model. We needed to get in front of supply chain managers or CFOs or CIOs of hospitals, and so we needed to find the right people to do that. And a lot of it is, someone taking a flyer on you. But I think it's more than that, because if you know what you're talking about and you can demonstrate that, then you can deliver. But I think the biggest challenge is always, is that balance between growing the business. Maybe you've got investors, outside investors that want to see growth, and keeping it profitable, especially in the beginning. And you're always, cash crunch is always a problem. And so you got to get through that first couple of years with enough capital to keep you going. A lot of people grow faster than they're able to. And I think I've made that mistake myself. And, of course, that causes dilution and causes problems with investors and that type of stuff. But, I have a saying, and I've always had this saying from day one, is that revenue cures all ills. You cannot take your focus off of sales and off of growing the business, but you have to do it in a balanced way, and that's challenging.
Well, I want to challenge you on that.
Sure.
Revenue, you said revenue
cures all ills.
Yeah.
I'm talking about in the very beginning.
All right.
Talking about in the very beginning.
But talk to me about getting the right team.
Yeah, well, that's paramount, okay? Mm-hmm. I think if I look at what I've done here in this particular niche that we've sort of created in the marketplace, it really had to do with getting the right people on board. When we first got into this business, the one thing we did, and we did really well, is we spent the first probably year and a half really honing down this model, and we had excellent people doing that, including myself and my partners. We spent the time to really differentiate ourselves with this model, so that when we did get the opportunity to get in front of a CIO or a CFO of a health system, we really knew what we were talking about, because we proved the model out. Having the right team and having the right sort of culture in that team, where it's, we're going to work together to solve problems. We're going to argue, we're going to disagree with each other, but at the end of the day, our focus is solving a problem so that we can grow our business.
So that becomes part of your core values.
Absolutely.
And how often have I seen people hire people who do not share their core values?
Yeah, and that is hard. And I've been victim of that myself. I think if I look at the last 12 to 15 years in terms of growing this business and some of the mistakes I made, the biggest mistakes I made is hiring the wrong people. Period. End of story. It wasn't in a sales process or the delivery of what our service is. It was, as we were growing fast, putting the wrong people in place, and it almost sets you back.
Oh, right, and there's two parts to it. Seems to me the two parts that I've observed. One is getting the right person that person fits your values,
right,
and the other is getting them in the right seat so that they're capable of it. And how often do we only look at the people who are capable of it, or at least we allow ourselves to be convinced that they're capable of it, but we forget about the values, and maybe it's because we're reaching hard for the revenue.
That's right.
We think this person can bring it to us, but if they don't share our values, they're going to be chipping away at the organization all along.
And the other mistake you make is having that person stay on longer than they should.
Oh, my goodness.
Right? Where you get them in, and it's your hire, so you're responsible for the person coming in, and within 6 months you see, this person's not gelling culturally with the way we do things around here, and you keep thinking that they're going to get better. And what ends up happening is that they end up becoming a cancer.
And that has to go all the way to the entire organization, right?
Well, and the higher level that person is, the more damage they do.
Yeah, but they do damage even if they're at the bottom.
No, they do. They do. The only difference I say that is when you have a service organization that's national, and you get somebody on top of that that's not delivering. And
that person who's going in there.
That's right.
Even to turn the screw.
Oh no, that's absolutely right. So my advice to people building a business, especially people, and I've experienced sort of hyper growth stages in business, And being very attuned to how these people are performing and customer feedback about those people's performance is very important. Letting it slide because you're too busy or because you don't want to upset the apple cart or whatever is the biggest mistake you can make. Right. When you find out the person is not going to work, you're not doing yourself or that person any good by keeping them on board.
Well, and it goes both ways. I mean, somehow we have this sense of, and I've experienced it in listening to senior executives, that firing somebody is doing them a disservice.
No,
it is not doing them a disservice. It absolutely,
Yeah.
because if they are not a fit, if they're not the right person, or they're not in the right seat, they're frustrated. Their productivity goes down. They're not looking at themselves happy in the mirror.
There's no question about that.
And so freeing them up to have a little space where they can get to ask the question, well, what do I really want to do?
Yeah, and I've had experience also with in service business with, individuals who are really good with the client. The client loves them, but they're tyrants to their people. Mm-hmm. Okay? And so you get into this thing where, gosh, I can't let go of this person because if I let go of the person, I might lose the client. Mm-hmm. But then they're causing all kinds of chaos with their staff. That's another challenge that people are going to run into in service businesses. And so my advice is err on the side of getting the right person. And if the person is wrong, even if the customer realizes, go and be really honest with the client and say, listen, I know you like so-and-so, but they're wreaking havoc with their staff and it's causing me a problem. If you were in my shoes, what would you do?
Right. Absolutely.
And so again, I'm speaking from having made those errors.
But we all do. That's why this is such an important message to people. Is we all make errors, and by sharing our experience, then we can help other people to not avoid errors, but maybe avoid those.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's really important for people is, I talk about revenue curing all ills, and the reason I say that is because without revenue, you can't be profitable.
Well, that's true.
Okay, so it's kind of chicken and egg, But profitability is also very important, and the reason profitability is important is because, your clients want you to be successful. Okay, if they like you and they contract with you,
they depend upon you.
They depend on you being, and the only way that you can be successful is to be profitable.
Yes.
So you have to price your products right or your services right. You have to manage them properly, and you have to focus on profitability. You pick a margin that you think is a reasonable margin that you can operate on, or that you should be operating on, and you focus every one of your deals on that margin.
Everybody knows that's what we're doing.
That's right.
We all know how we're going to get there.
That's right.
And then we measure it.
That's right.
Every week.
Listen, there are plenty of models out there, especially in software and really high tech kind of stuff, where they're never profitable. It's a constant investment in R&D or marketing to get it out there. But that's a different realm than bootstrapping a business and getting it off the ground. If you're going to get into the software business, and for a small period of time we were in that business years ago, not worth going into. If you're going to get into that software game, you have to understand profitability is going to take a long time. Okay, especially now because it's so competitive, and you better have something that's a mousetrap that's really tight that nobody can get around. But that's a different model than building a retail business or building a clothing business or building a service business like ours. It's really important that you understand what you need to do to invest to get yourself to profitability and stay profitable.
And monitor that regularly, right?
Absolutely.
And so that you can those become the red flags or the clanging bells that say you need to pay attention to this.
That's exactly
and
right.
then let's get down and solve the real problem, not the symptom.
Yeah,
the real problem.
And the early days of starting a business there's a lot of anxiety, and you need to tell your significant others, if you're married or you're whatever's going on in your life, and people depending on you outside of work, that hey, this is going to be a 24/7 part of me for the foreseeable future. And it does. A lot of people get into this thinking, they're going to get rich quick, and I'm not a big believer in the getting rich quick thing. I think that's extremely rare, and that it really only happens when you have millions and millions of venture capital dollars behind you, and you've got something like a Facebook or something like that.
Well, all right. But in looking at that 24/7 beginning, at some point, as you begin to get the right people in the right seat, it's very important to begin handing off responsibility.
100%, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs run into that problem.
Well, yeah, they're not out surfing at trestles in the morning.
Well, I was out before the sun even came.
Well, I understand, but
and got out of the water by 6:37.
But the entrepreneur who does not delegate, all right, and then move himself or herself to the place where they are elevating to do the things that they love doing and are great at. If they're still fixing the things that they may be good at but don't like doing.
Well, I think the other problem with a lot of entrepreneurs is they can't scale themselves. They can't scale, right? They get to a certain, they become the business. Their personality becomes the business, and they can't hire good people underneath them because they call all the shots 24, all the time, 24/7. And so when they bring somebody else in, that person wants to do something a little bit differently. They're not able to delegate, and that if you're going to start a business and you want to get it beyond $20-30 million in revenue, you better be ready to delegate.
Absolutely, but then you delegate to people that you trust,
and you delegate to people that you trust.
You hire people who get where you're going as a company.
That's right.
Who want to be there. They want to take the responsibility for this, and they're capable of it.
And maybe you give them a small stake in the game.
Well, that's a nice thing.
It's a nice thing.
But I think. Well, I'll ask you. Which is more important to you? Lots of money or doing something that you love doing that you're great at? If you had to choose.
The latter. Of course. Everybody would.
And that, to me, the money is the cherry on the top.
I mean, if you do what you love to do and you do it really well, you will have there will be economic reward.
Right.
Okay? And actually, there's a lot of people that do what they do and they love what they do, and maybe they're teachers or something like that, and the economic reward is also, they're not focused so much on that because they don't want to, a lot of people get into business because they want to be millionaires or whatever the number is in their head, but loving what you do is more important than anything.
Well, I detect in you...
Because you're not going to be any good to anybody if you don't love what you do.
Well, I detect in you that what you are excited about, now I could be wrong, but what you're excited about is helping hospitals manage their vendors, increase the quality of service that they're getting, and reducing the cost.
Those three items are the most important things. Why? Because we understand and appreciate, because all we do as hospitals, the incredibly important nature of the work that they do. Caregivers are our customers. Mm-hmm. So if we can make their lives easier, if we can make them operate in a better manner so they can provide superior care, then we've done our job.
Well, that's right. And you have served not only the hospital, but all of the people who are coming to the hospital.
100%.
And that's powerful.
We think so.
Well,
we think so.
It is. I one of my clients, an international client who is revolutionizing the pharmaceutical industry. Mm-hmm. And it's a very simple thing that he designed. He tells me he designed it in one of my training classes while he was just sitting there, right?
Yeah.
And if you can imagine Amgen or any of the other Merck.
Sure.
All right, they have these enormous processes and these tubes and these pipes and all of these things, and they all have valves.
Gigantic buildings.
Yes, and they all have valves in them, right?
Yeah.
Well, and so every one of those valves periodically has to be cleaned.
Yeah.
So what that means is stopping the whole process and then unscrewing all those valves, taking them out, cleaning them, making sure they're clean, bringing them back and screwing them back. Takes
expensive.
Days. Oh, my goodness, the expense is enormous.
Yeah.
This fellow designed a single-use valve, which means that it's got an insert in it, and all you have to do is go in and take that insert out and put a new one in. Right?
It's revolutionary.
It's revolutionary in that it will reduce the cost of drugs.
Production,
It's amazing what he's doing. He's not doing it for the money.
No.
Right?
I'm sure he'll end up, if he gets a patent on that.
Well, he does have a patent on it, and the money is the scorecard.
Sure.
Because what he's excited about doing is solving this problem.
Well, and solving a problem, having really happy customers, having great employees, is what we're all about, and is what we are excited about. Mm-hmm. We know we're going to be successful if we have those elements. We know we're going to be successful, and we're going to have, more importantly, we're going to have a lot of fun doing it, and life becomes more exciting.
Yeah,
than just sort of slugging it out. Which, listen, a lot of people slug it out. I don't have anything against that whatsoever. I slugged it out for many, many years mm-hmm. myself. Business is what makes this country great.
Yes.
And free market is what makes this country great. I still, I'm a true believer in the fact that this country is the place, the only place in the world where you can pursue your dreams as long as you work really, really hard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So. And take some time to surf.
Once in a while.
Oh.
When there's a good swell.
Okay.
There's a good swell in the water today, so I wanted to take advantage.
So what would you tell business owners, got businesses between 10 and 250 employees. What would you tell them?
I would say stay at it. Be the best at what you do. Stay focused on the important things, and that's people, and that's process, and that's profitability. Those are the three things that you really need to focus on to keep that business healthy. Doesn't mean you have to build the biggest business in the world in your little area, but if you focus on those three things and enjoy yourself, and once in a while stop and smell the roses or go surf at Trestles, then your life is going to be good, and that's the most important thing, the pursuit of happiness, right?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. That's wonderful. Well, Joe, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy calendar, I'm sure.
My pleasure. I just want to say, this is a solemn day, September 11th.
Yeah.
A solemn day. And I want to thank, I come from a military family. Many people in my family still active duty. And I want to thank, first of all, remember all those that we lost on September 11th, 2001. And thank all of our uniformed personnel around the world who protect us every day.
Yeah, very important. Very important. Well, thanks a lot for being with us, Joe.
Okay, my pleasure.
Now, if somebody wanted to talk to you further, how would they get in touch with you?
They can email me at joeflynn, JOEFLYNN, at vereco.com, at Verico.com. That's probably the best way.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Joe. This has been another wonderful experience with business CEOs and business owners in Southern California with a desire that we can help businesses in California thrive.
You've been listening to The Pilgrim on the 405 with Will Christ. To hear more of the programs in this podcast, go to www.willchrist.com.